Scott Derrickson's Sinister. Let's start with the opening shot. It's a perfect way to open this film. You have a family being horrifically hung in their backyard. You don't know who's carrying out this heinous act. We're thrown right into the terror of this movie at the very beginning. Ethan Hawke definitely carries this film. You can see the terror and the dread and the agony on his character's face when he's watching these horrific films. You get this sense of desperation in his character because his name is Ellison Oswald. He's a true crime writer who found success in an early work, and he's trying to regain that fame and that acclaim. His desperation is so apparent that he even goes as far as to move his family into the house that this family was murdered. It's so tragic that both Ellison and his family die at the hands of his daughter, but because of Ellison's insatiable drive. It's why he puts himself through the misery and the torturous misery of watching these films of various families being murdered in repugnant ways. As he watches, he becomes more and more restless, and he loses sleep, and he starts to drink a lot to cope with this not only guilt that's slowly eating away at him, but this evil presence that he feels like now he's a part of because he's seen something he probably shouldn't have seen and got himself into something he definitely should not have gotten himself into. Vincent D'onofrio is also in this film, and he's very good too. He adds a bit of nuance to this film. He's only in a couple scenes, but the scenes that he's in really work for me. He plays a paranormal professor named Jonas, who kind of enlightens Ellison on this film's antagonist and this consistent symbol that keeps appearing in these different home films. And once Ellison learns of this, he begins to think, wow, I think I made a mistake. Yeah, no shit. So what he really adds is the history of this film's antagonist, an evil pagan deity who corrupts innocent children. And so they become his pawns, and it nourishes him in some way. Aesthetically, Bagul is not too scary, but it's more of the way that the film portrays him, subtly appearing in each home video. The majority of the time we see Bagul, it's in images that Ellison has compiled, so he's not physically in the movie too much. You feel his presence, sort of like a parasite, just sucking the life out of this family that he's preying upon. And the cool thing about this film is that the exposition really works. What could normally appear as lazy and kind of just, well, he just finds these films and all of a sudden he knows all about them, it works in the context of Ellison being a writer who's looking for evidence to figure out this story. We discover this evil lurking in the shadows as our characters do. I know in my It review I said that I wasn't a fan of jump scares, and I stand by that. And to be fair, this film has its share of jump scares. The difference between an It jump scare and a Sinister one is that the former's jump scare often results in a wacky, over-the-top monster image, whereas the latter's often results in nothing. It's mainly Ellison's psyche playing tricks on him, while this evil presence is infiltrating his family and his home, and that's a lot more terrifying than just having him constantly appear. When the jump scare does appear as something real, it's often a ghost child or what he thinks to be Bagul. So I think that the jump scares really complement this film instead of oversaturating it. Let's talk about the score. This film has one of the most diabolical scores I've ever heard. Most of the time the score just consists of jarring, disturbing sounds as opposed to composed music. And while the score is composed, it's not composed of traditional orchestras and bands. It's a really good combination of like distorted spiritual choir music, and it really works. At times, the score almost sounds like it's playing backwards, which makes it come off as like a mistake. There's something really wrong here, which there is. When Ellison is watching the videos, the score really takes over and it drowns out everything else, and it's haunting. So the horror in this film penetrates two of our senses, and that's really, really cool. And the film deserves a lot of credit for that. As a music fanatic, especially with scores, in my opinion, and I'm sure most of you will agree with me on this, but the score is one of the most important aspects of filmmaking because it's the primary method of conveying emotion. I could honestly do an entire video on this film score, but let's keep moving. The film actually scared me, and it's not often that a horror film actually scares me. As a young adult, this film really affected me. I really did feel something, and that's to be commended. Not because I think that, oh, this could really happen in real life. It's not one of those scary movies. It's more like you feel bad for this family. You really feel like something bad is happening, and like I said before, he stumbles upon something that he shouldn't have, and his family ultimately pays the ultimate price for it. Again, it's very tragic. Ellison puts his drive and his curiosity over his family's well-being. He keeps watching because, again, it's this story that he wants to write or dig into, but you can tell he's really having a hard time watching these and taking it in and pondering it and trying to come to the conclusions that he never ends up coming to. So the film isn't just creepy, but it's disturbing, and not disturbing in like a hostile, like torture porn way, disturbing in a genuine way, where you really feel for this family and this unfortunate situation that they've been dragged into. You don't want to see what happens next, even though subliminally you could probably figure out what's going to happen next. You don't want to see it, and that's when you know that the film is doing a good job at scaring its audience. The film is also very dark, and not just its content, but in its lighting. It's a very dimly lit film. Once Ellison discovers the dark secrets in his home, the lighting drastically changes. Once that darkness enters his mind, that's when the film becomes really dark, because before that, the film is lit pretty well. When Ellison is maneuvering throughout his house, the lighting is very dark. It's almost like the only thing you can see is him. And so you feel like you're walking through the house with him. I really like the editing and the direction, because there's no real quick cuts. There's shots linger, and they pan, and they stay on one focus for a while. The editing is not choppy, and for a horror movie, that's what happens a lot of times. Even when, you know, at the very last scene, when all the shit really hits the fan, the camera is focusing on what's actually happening. Nothing is really distracting you from what you're seeing. It feels very real and in time, and it really, really builds suspense. I mean, honestly, after the film was over, I was walking around my house hoping that Bagul didn't appear on my right. God. If the film was dark from the first shot, like in terms of its lighting, it wouldn't really mean anything. But again, since the darkness in terms of the lighting happens as he discovers these videos, that's why the lighting actually has an effect on the film instead of just being an aspect of it. The suspense is established early on, and it keeps building until the audience just can't take it anymore, and the final scene happens and they're all about to die, and you're just like, Jesus. The film is very psychologically muddled, and so it should play with your concept of good and evil. It should toy with your emotions like that. You know, true evil doesn't just pop out and scare you. It's not that thing that you think you see in the corner of your bedroom when you're sleeping. True evil is an entity that corrupts the good parts of you and takes something away and drags you down, to turns you into something you're not, until you're just broken. You know, it picks away at your soul. And Sinister is a film that understands this. Evil is something with no respect for life, and I think that's why having Bagul toy with families is so sinister, because nothing is closer than a family. To be part of a family is to understand true unconditional love. So to break down that dynamic and make families turn on each other, especially the innocent child, it's so sinister. That's the best way to describe it. I'm telling you, you would be doing yourself a real disservice by watching this film during the day instead of at night with the volume all the way up and the lights turned off. The film isn't perfect though. There are things I didn't like. Like I said, there's a lot of shots of Ellison just walking around his house, and it gets a little repetitive, almost as if they're trying to pad the runtime, especially in the second act, and it can get a little boring. But I think, you know, again, the film was trying to build suspense. There didn't need to be a bunch of things happening the entire time. It's appropriate to have scenes of him just walking around when he hears abnormal noises in his attic and shit. So when you understand this, it doesn't really hinder your thoughts on the film. Also, some of the dialogue between Ellison and his family can seem a little cliche and not too original, but this is not where the film tries to succeed. The film just needs to establish that this family is becoming more and more distant as Ellison becomes more and more engrossed in this story. I truly felt uneasy while watching this film. It's the surreal editing, it's the dark cinematography, it's the great acting and the haunting score that allows me to enjoy this film. It just stuck out to me. I saw it when it came out in 2012. At that time I was 13, 14. So I was a kid, but I rewatched it before making this review, and I gotta tell you, man, it still holds up. It still, you know, actually kind of creeps me out. It scared me, and that's the highest hope I can have when watching a horror film. If it has that effect on me, I'm good with it. You know, it had its moments of cliche horror tropes, but it did have a unique story. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think of this film, if it actually scared you or not. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment down below. I'd be more than appreciative if you did. Stay tuned, and I will see you next week. Have a great day, everybody.